Darkness had a taste in the silver mines of Ravenclaw territory. Bitter, metallic, inescapable. Celine had learned to breathe it in without coughing, had taught her lungs to accept the poisoned air as normal over 7 long years of captivity. Her white blonde hair remained hidden beneath a gray scarf caked with dirt and sweat, her pale skin covered despite the suffocating heat of the underground tunnels. Only her storm-gray eyes might betray her, so she kept them lowered, focused on the rough stone floor as she moved through the winding passages with practiced silence. The Ravenclaw pack had no use for slaves who drew attention to themselves. Those who stood out disappeared quickly, their fate whispered about in the cramped sleeping quarters when guards weren't listening. Celine had survived by becoming invisible, a shadow that moved through the silver mines without disrupting the air around her. Tonight, she patrolled the deepest tunnels alone, a task reserved only for the most trusted slaves, those who had demonstrated their broken spirit and acceptance of fate. The guards believed Celine was one of these broken ones. They were wrong. Beneath her carefully cultivated mask of submission, a spark remained, a tiny flame of defiance she protected fiercely. 7 years of slavery had not extinguished it, though she had become masterful at hiding its light from those who would snuff it out permanently. The silver lantern in her hand cast wavering shadows against the tunnel walls as she performed her inspection duties. Her job was simple: check support beams, mark unstable areas, report any signs of potential collapse. The Ravenclaw pack had built their fortune and power on these mines, the silver extracted from the earth by slave labor, making them wealthy enough to challenge even the oldest and greatest packs for territory. They worked their slaves until they dropped dead, then simply captured more in their territorial raids, an endless supply of omegas and low-ranking betas from conquered packs. Celine's mind drifted to memories she tried to keep buried. The day the Ravenclaw wolves had descended upon her home territory. The Riverstone pack had been peaceful, primarily fishers and traders, with barely 50 wolves total. They had refused to surrender their river access to Ravenclaw. The price of that refusal had been total annihilation. Celine had been just 15 when she watched her parents, both respected betas, die fighting to protect the pack's omegas and children. She had survived the slaughter only to be chained and marched to these mines with the other captives. Her younger brother Eli, only 8 at the time, had survived the initial attack only to succumb to lung sickness 6 months later. The harsh conditions of the mines had stolen his breath day by day until nothing remained. Celine still carried his small wooden carving of a riverfish in a hidden pocket sewn into her threadbare clothing, the last connection to the life that had been stolen from her. The memories threatened to overwhelm her concentration, a dangerous lapse in a place where attention meant survival. She forced herself back to the present, to the weight of the lantern in her hand, to the sound of water dripping somewhere in the darkness beyond her light. She was approaching the sealed section now, tunnels that had been closed off 3 years prior after a collapse killed 5 slaves. Even the guards avoided this area, the entrance blocked with wooden planks marked with warning symbols. The sound reached her ears faintly at first, nearly lost beneath the ambient noises of the mines. A whimper, pained and desperate, coming from beyond the sealed passage. Celine froze, her heartbeat suddenly thundering in her ears. Nothing should be back there. The area was unstable, dangerous, and strictly forbidden. Yet the sound came again, weaker this time, and something about it called to the wolf inside her. 7 years of careful survival demanded she ignore it, continue her inspection route, return to the slave quarters, and forget she had heard anything. Getting involved in matters not her concern was the fastest path to an unmarked grave. But the sound struck something primal in her core, something her years of captivity had not managed to break. The part of her that remembered what it meant to be pack, to help those who were suffering, to choose compassion even when survival instincts said otherwise. The wooden barrier had rotted with age and neglect. The guards, confident in the slaves' fear of punishment, hadn't bothered maintaining it properly. Celine set her lantern down and tested one of the boards, finding it gave way with minimal effort. She glanced back down the tunnel, ensuring she was truly alone, then made her decision. If she was going to die in these mines, as seemed inevitable, She would rather die doing something meaningful than waste away from silver poisoning and despair like so many before her. Celine squeezed through the gap she created, reclaiming her lantern and holding it high to illuminate the forbidden tunnel. The state of the passage confirmed why it had been sealed. The walls showed extensive cracking, the ceiling sagged in places, and small piles of debris littered the floor where pieces had already fallen. She moved carefully, testing each step before committing her weight, straining her enhanced hearing for any sounds of imminent collapse. The whimper came again, louder now but distorted by the winding tunnels, making it impossible to pinpoint the exact source. Celine followed the sound deeper into the abandoned section, past collapsed areas and around corners that should have made her turn back. The sensible part of her mind screamed warnings, but something stronger propelled her forward, an instinct she couldn't ignore. She found the source in what had once been an interrogation chamber, a room the guards had used for particularly stubborn slaves before the section became too unstable. The space was small and windowless, with iron rings set into the walls and dark stains on the floor she refused to examine too closely. In the center of this chamber of horrors, covered in silver chains so thick and heavy they appeared to weigh more than she did, lay the largest white wolf she had ever seen. Celine halted in the doorway, her lantern illuminating a scene that twisted her stomach with equal parts horror and rage. The wolf was massive, easily 4 feet tall at the shoulder, even lying down. His white fur, which should have been pristine, was matted with blood and burned black wherever the silver touched his skin. The chains wrapped around his entire body from neck to tail, so many layers she couldn't comprehend how he could still breathe beneath their crushing weight. Silver smoke rose from every point of contact between metal and flesh, the silver actively burning through fur and skin. The scent of burning hair and meat made Celine's eyes water, but it was the runes carved into the chains that made her blood run cold. She recognized these symbols from her grandmother's tales, stories about ancient magics most packs had abandoned centuries ago. These were binding runes, designed to prevent shifting and drain energy, dark magic outlawed by the Council of Alphas for being too cruel even for prisoners of war. Someone hadn't merely chained this wolf with silver. They had ensured he couldn't escape, couldn't shift to heal, couldn't do anything except suffer and die slowly in this forgotten room. The implications were staggering. This was no ordinary prisoner. This was someone important enough to warrant this level of torture, someone dangerous enough that the Ravenclaw Alpha wanted him dead in a way that would leave no evidence. The wolf's eyes cracked open as her light fell across him. Ice-blue irises glowed even in the dimness of the chamber, piercing and intelligent. He looked at her with such profound pain and desperate hope that Celine felt something crack in her chest, a physical sensation like breaking ice. His breath came in shallow pants, each inhale visibly agonizing, and she could count his ribs through the burns in his fur. He had been here for days at minimum, possibly weeks, left to die in darkness where no one would hear him scream. Every instinct of self-preservation told Celine to leave, to back away slowly, return to her assigned area, and forget she had ever found this prisoner. Helping him would be treason against the Ravenclaw pack, an offense punishable by execution so brutal it would make her 7 years of slavery seem merciful by comparison. Yet looking into those ice-blue eyes, seeing the intelligence and pain and desperate hope within them, Celine found she no longer cared about consequences. "I'm going to help you," she whispered, her voice rough from disuse. Speaking was dangerous in the mines, drawing attention that could lead to punishment. She set down her lantern and approached slowly, hands extended to show she meant no harm. "I don't know if you understand me, but I'm going to get these chains off. Just hold on." The white wolf made a sound between a whimper and a whine, his eyes never leaving her face. Up close, he was even more magnificent than she had first realized. His features were too refined, too powerful to be an ordinary wolf. This was a shifter of rare lineage, trapped in animal form by the binding runes and too weak to shift back even if the magic permitted it. A shifter with fur this white and pure, with a build this massive, with eyes this striking, could only be from one of the ancient bloodlines. And if he was important enough to be tortured this extensively, he was certainly important enough that his pack was frantically searching for him. The realization brought both hope and fear. Hope that helping him might mean freedom from the mines, fear that she might be trading one form of captivity for another. Celine reached for the first chain, then paused as she felt the familiar tingle in her palms that had been her secret since childhood. Silver didn't burn her the way it burned other wolves. Her grandmother had called it a blessing from the moon goddess, told her stories of the silver blessed who appeared once in a generation with immunity to the metal that poisoned their kind. Her parents had called it a curse and made her swear never to reveal it to anyone, knowing such a rare gift would make her a target. The Ravenclaw pack remained unaware of her resistance. She had hidden it carefully, pretending to suffer from silver sickness like all the other slaves, wearing gloves whenever handling the metal directly. If they discovered she could touch silver without burning, they would work her even harder, probably until the constant exposure killed her, regardless of her resistance. But now, in this moment, her secret gift was the only thing that could save this wolf's life. The chains were industrial grade, designed to hold even the strongest alpha shifter. Celine couldn't break them with strength alone, but 7 years in the mines had taught her where tools were stored. She ran back to the main tunnel and retrieved bolt cutters, a hacksaw, and a pry bar from a supply cache, tools meant for maintaining the mine infrastructure. The implements were heavy and awkward in her hands, designed for wolves much larger and stronger than her slight omega frame. But determination lent her strength as she returned to the chamber and set to work. The first chain fell away with a metallic clatter that echoed through the room, making both of them flinch at the noise. Celine paused, listening intently for any sign they had been discovered, then continued when no alarm sounded. She worked methodically for what felt like hours, her hands cramping and bleeding from the effort, sweat dripping into her eyes as she cut and pried and broke chain after chain. The white wolf remained perfectly still, only his labored breathing and occasional soft whimper indicating he remained conscious. Celine found herself talking to him as she worked, a constant stream of quiet reassurance and encouragement, telling him to hold on, promising freedom, begging him not to give up. She didn't know if he understood her words, but she couldn't bear to work in silence, needed her own voice to ground her in this moment of madness and hope. The binding runes complicated her task. Each chain she removed seemed to make the remaining ones tighten, as if the magic sensed its hold weakening and compensated accordingly. But Celine refused to quit. She had endured 7 years of what should have killed her in months, had outlasted guards' cruelty and fellow slaves' despair. She would free this wolf or die in the attempt. When the final chain fell away with a heavy clang, the white wolf took his first full breath, his massive chest expanding properly for the first time since she had found him. His whole body shuddered with the inhale, a tremor that seemed to run from nose to tail tip. His ice-blue eyes opened fully, fixing on Celine with an intensity that stole her breath. The look held recognition, gratitude, and something else, something deeper that she had no time to analyze. She began gathering the chains, attempting to hide evidence of what she had done. The guards would check the deep mines within the hour, and if they found her here with a freed prisoner, her death would be inevitable and agonizing. The wolf needed to leave immediately, needed to escape Ravenclaw territory before anyone realized he was free. And she needed to return to her quarters and pretend this had never happened. "You need to go," she urged, backing toward the door. "Get up. Run. Get as far from here as you can before they realize you're gone." The white wolf struggled to his feet, his legs shaking violently, burned skin still smoking in places where the silver had done the most damage. He was weak, possibly too weak to make it far. But she couldn't help with that, couldn't risk being caught, couldn't throw away 7 years of careful survival for a stranger, no matter how much her heart screamed at her to do exactly that. She turned to leave and froze when she heard his voice, rough and deep and absolutely human, despite coming from a wolf's throat. "Wait!" Celine spun back around, disbelief written across her features. Shifters in wolf form couldn't speak. It was physically impossible, their vocal cords unable to form human speech. Yet she had heard him clearly, the single word unmistakable. But the white wolf was no longer a wolf. In his place stood a man, naked and covered in silver burns and dried blood, tall enough that he had to duck to avoid hitting his head on the low ceiling. His hair was platinum blonde, hanging to his shoulders in tangled waves that somehow managed to appear majestic despite his condition. His face was all sharp angles and strong bones, with a jaw that could cut glass and lips twisted in pain. His body was pure muscle, broad shoulders tapering to a narrow waist and long legs, though clearly malnourished from his captivity. But it was his eyes that made Celine's heart stutter in her chest. Ice blue, pale and striking, looking at her with an intensity that made her want to both flee and move closer. And she recognized those eyes, had seen them in drawings, and heard them described in the terrified whispers of guards who thought slaves weren't listening. She had just freed Thorn, the Alpha King of the Moonhaven Pack, the most powerful Alpha in 500 miles. The wolf who had been at war with Ravenclaw for 3 years over territorial disputes and Ravenclaw's refusal to abandon slave trading. The king who had disappeared 2 weeks ago during what was supposed to be peace negotiations under a white flag of truce. The guards had been bragging about capturing him, about how he had honored the terms of parley while they had betrayed that trust to take him prisoner, and she had just cut him loose. Thorn took a shaking step toward her, his legs barely supporting his weight, his hand reaching out as if he wanted to touch her, but was giving her the choice to move away. "You freed me," he said, his voice hoarse from days of screaming or disuse. "You touched Silver to save me. You risked your life for a stranger." Celine backed up until her shoulders hit the wall, mind racing with panic and implications. "You need to go," she said, forcing the words past her tight throat. "Right now. The guards check the deep mines every 2 hours. If they find you here, if they know I helped you, they'll kill everyone in the slave quarters. Every Omega, every child, everyone. You need to leave before anyone realizes you're gone." Thorn shook his head slowly, those piercing eyes never leaving her face. "I'm not leaving without you. You're mine now. By law of the Moon Goddess and right of life debt, you belong to me. Where I go, you go." The words hit Celine like a physical blow. She had spent 7 years as property, 7 years being owned and controlled and treated like an object instead of a person. She dreamed of freedom, of making her own choices, of belonging to no one but herself. And this man, this king she had just saved, was claiming ownership of her as if she were a prize he had won. "I don't belong to anyone," she said, her voice shaking with anger and fear. "I'm not your property. I saved your life because it was the right thing to do, not because I wanted a new master." Something flickered in Thorn's eyes, an emotion Celine couldn't identify. "I didn't mean it like that," he started, then swayed on his feet, his legs finally giving out. Celine moved without thinking, catching him before he could hit the ground, her arms wrapping around his waist as she tried to support his much larger frame. He was burning with fever, his skin hot to the touch where it wasn't covered in silver burns, his breathing labored and uneven. "You're going to die if you don't get help," she said, adjusting her grip to keep him upright. "Can you walk? Can you make it to the surface?" Thorn's arm came around her shoulders, using her as a crutch as he struggled to stand. "I can walk, but I'm not leaving you here. If the guards realize what you've done, they'll kill you. You're coming with me." "I can't," Celine said desperately, even as she helped him toward the door. "The other slaves, they'll punish everyone for this. They'll make examples. I have friends here, people I care about. I can't abandon them." "Then we'll come back for them," Thorn promised, his weight heavy against her side. "After I've recovered, after I've gathered my warriors, we'll free every slave in these mines and burn Ravenclaw territory to the ground. But first, I need to get you somewhere safe." They stumbled through the tunnels together, Celine supporting as much of Thorn's weight as she could while navigating the unstable passages. Every sound made her heart race, every shadow made her expect guards to appear. But somehow they made it back to the main mining shaft, to the lift that would take them to the surface. The night air hit them like a physical force when they emerged, cold and clean after the stifling heat and dust of the mines. Thorn breathed deeply, his eyes closing momentarily as if savoring the feeling of fresh air in his lungs. Around them, the Ravenclaw pack's compound was quiet, most wolves asleep at this late hour, only a few guards on patrol near the perimeter and none near the mine entrance. "My territory is 3 days north," Thorn said quietly, his hand tightening on Celine's shoulder. "If we can make it to the border, my wolves will scent me and come. We just need to survive that long." Celine thought about the slave quarters, about the 20 other Omegas who had become her family over 7 years of shared suffering. She thought about old Vera, who had taught her to read using scratches in the dirt, about young Eli, only 12 and still believing he might see his parents again someday, about Lyra and Cain, the bonded pair who had managed to survive together by protecting each other. If she left with Thorn, if the guards discovered what she had done, those wolves would suffer for her choices. But looking at Thorn, seeing the determination in his eyes despite his weakness, feeling the way his hand trembled where it gripped her shoulder, she realized she couldn't let him die either. He was important, not just to himself, but to thousands of wolves who lived in his territory. His death would mean full-scale war, would mean more destruction and death and suffering. And maybe, just maybe, if she helped him get home, he would keep his promise to come back for the others. 10 minutes, she said firmly. "Give me 10 minutes to warn my friends, to tell them to run before you bring your army back here. Please." Thorn studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. 10 minutes. But if anyone tries to stop you, if anyone threatens you, you scream and I'll kill them. Understood? Celine didn't waste time arguing. She ran to the slave quarters, a long, low building at the edge of the compound, and slipped inside as quietly as possible. Most of the slaves were asleep, exhausted from 16-hour shifts in the mines. But Vera was awake, sitting by the small window like she always did on clear nights, watching the stars she would likely never see from anywhere but this prison. "Vera," Celine whispered urgently, shaking the old woman's thin shoulder, "listen to me carefully. I freed the Moonhaven King from the deep mines. He's alive, and I'm helping him escape. When the guards realize he's gone, they're going to punish everyone here looking for who helped him. You need to wake everyone up and run right now. Take the children and those who can travel and get as far from here as possible." Vera's eyes went wide, her wrinkled hand gripping Celine's wrist with surprising strength. "Child, what have you done?" "What I had to," Celine answered, already moving to wake the others. "He's going to come back. He's going to bring his army and free everyone and destroy this place. But you need to survive until then. So run, please." She woke as many as she could in the limited time, whispering urgent warnings and directions to flee while the guards were minimal. Some believed her immediately and began gathering what few possessions they had. Others thought she had gone mad from silver poisoning or exhaustion. A few were too sick or too old to move, resigned to whatever fate awaited them. But Celine did what she could, gave them the choice she had been given, and then returned to Thorn before her 10 minutes expired. He was leaning against the mine entrance, his legs shaking with the effort of remaining upright, but his eyes tracked her movement with sharp awareness. Did they listen? Some of them, Celine admitted, moving to his side to support him again. The ones who can run will run. The ones who can't will face whatever comes. I did what I could. Thorn's arm came around her shoulders once more, heavier this time, his strength clearly fading fast. Then let's go. We need to cover as much ground as possible before sunrise. They walked into the forest, leaving behind the only home Celine had known for 7 years, leaving behind friends she might never see again, walking toward a future she couldn't predict with a man she didn't know. Thorn's weight grew heavier with each step, his breathing more labored, his skin burning hotter with fever. The silver poisoning was worsening, his supernatural healing unable to cope with the extensive damage while he remained so weak. By the time the first hints of dawn lightened the eastern sky, Thorn could barely walk. Celine had been practically carrying him for the last hour, her own strength nearly depleted, her muscles screaming with exhaustion. They had made it perhaps 5 miles from the Ravenclaw compound, not nearly far enough to be safe, nowhere close to Moonhaven territory. "We need to stop," Celine said, her voice strained. "You need rest. You need food and water and treatment for those burns." Thorn shook his head stubbornly, trying to force his legs to keep moving. "Can't stop. Not safe. They'll have hunting parties out by now. We keep moving or we die." But his legs gave out before he could take another step, and they both collapsed in a heap on the forest floor. Thorn tried to rise, his arms shaking with the effort, but he couldn't manage it. The silver poisoning had progressed too far, his body shutting down from days of torture and exposure to the metal toxic to his kind. Celine knelt beside him, her hands hovering over his burned skin, desperate to help but not knowing how. She had learned basic healing in the mines, had needed to know enough to keep fellow slaves alive since dead workers were useless to the Ravenclaw pack. But this was beyond her skill. Thorn needed a proper healer, needed medicine and time and care she couldn't provide in the middle of the forest while running for their lives. "Listen to me," Thorn said, his voice barely audible, those ice-blue eyes finding hers. "In my left boot, there's a hidden compartment, emergency healing potion. Take it out." Celine fumbled with his boot, finding a concealed pocket containing a small glass vial. The liquid inside glowed faintly blue, and when she uncorked it, the smell was sharp and medicinal, almost burning her nostrils. "What is it?" she asked, uncertain. "Concentrated wolfsbane mixed with silver extract," Thorn said, managing a weak smile at her shocked expression. "I know, sounds like poison, but for silver poisoning, you fight fire with fire. The wolfsbane neutralizes the silver in my bloodstream. It'll hurt like hell, but it'll keep me alive long enough to reach my territory." Celine helped him sit up enough to drink, supporting his head as he swallowed the potion in one gulp. The effect was immediate and violent. Thorn's body convulsed, his back arching as he screamed through gritted teeth, and Celine held him as best she could while he thrashed. She could smell the silver being purged from his system, could see the burns on his skin starting to close as his healing finally activated properly. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Thorn went limp in her arms, his breathing evening out, his fever breaking. He was still weak, still injured, but no longer on the verge of death. The emergency potion had bought them time. "Rest," Celine said softly, brushing his platinum hair back from his face. "Just for a little while. I'll keep watch." Thorn's hand caught hers, his grip surprisingly strong for someone who had just been convulsing. "You saved my life twice now, once in the mines and once just now. I owe you everything." "You don't owe me anything," Celine said, trying to pull her hand away, but he held firm. "I did what anyone would do." "No," Thorn said, his eyes intense despite his exhaustion. "You did what most people wouldn't. You risked everything to free a stranger. You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most foolish, and right now I'm too grateful to care which." They rested for 2 hours while the sun climbed higher in the sky. Celine dozed fitfully, jerking awake at every sound, certain that hunting parties were closing in. But the forest remained quiet, except for birds and small animals. No signs of pursuit yet. Either the guards hadn't realized Thorn was gone, or they were planning something more complex than a simple search party. When Thorn woke, he looked markedly better. His burns were still visible but healing, his strength returning slowly as his body recovered. He could walk on his own now, though Celine stayed close in case he needed support. They moved faster than before, covering ground at a pace that would have been impossible with Thorn in his previous condition. "Tell me about yourself," Thorn said as they walked, his eyes scanning the forest constantly for threats. "How did you end up in the Ravenclaw mines? You're clearly not born a slave." Celine hesitated, not wanting to share her story, but his tone was genuinely curious rather than demanding. "My pack was destroyed 7 years ago. The Ravenclaw pack wanted control of the river that ran through our territory. We refused to surrender it. They massacred everyone, took the survivors as slaves." "What was your pack called?" "Riverstone," Celine said quietly, the name painful to speak after so long. "We were small, only about 50 wolves total, mostly fishers and traders. We didn't stand a chance against Ravenclaw's warriors." Thorn's jaw tightened, anger flashing in his ice-blue eyes. "I remember hearing about that. The Council of Alphas condemned it but did nothing to punish Ravenclaw. I was still learning to lead my pack then, not yet king, or I would have intervened." "Would you?" Selena asked, unable to keep the skepticism from her voice. Would you really have gone to war over a pack of 50 wolves you didn't know? Yes, Thorn said simply, conviction evident in his tone. Because allowing one pack to massacre another without consequences sets a precedent. Because small packs deserve protection just as much as large ones. Because doing nothing makes you complicit in the crime. He paused, his expression darkening. I've spent the last 3 years trying to force Ravenclaw to stop their slave trade, trying to negotiate peace while also preparing for war. Coming to their territory under a white flag was a mistake, clearly, but I had to try one more time before I brought my full army down on them. They walked in silence for a while, the forest growing denser as they moved north. Celine found herself studying Thorn when she thought he wasn't looking. He moved with a grace that spoke of years of warrior training, his posture straight and alert, despite his lingering weakness. He was handsome in a way that was almost intimidating, too perfect and powerful to seem entirely real. And he was the Alpha King, ruler of one of the greatest packs in the region, a position of power and responsibility she couldn't even imagine. And he had claimed her as his. The thought made her stomach twist with complicated emotions. Part of her was flattered, confused that someone like him would want someone like her, but a larger part was angry, resentful that he'd declared ownership without asking what she wanted. She'd been property for 7 years. She wasn't eager to become property again, even if the owner was kinder than her previous masters. "What did you mean?" she asked suddenly, unable to keep the question contained any longer. "When you said I belong to you, what did that mean?" Thorn stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "I phrased that poorly. I was weak and not thinking clearly." He ran a hand through his tangled platinum hair, a gesture that seemed almost nervous. "What I meant was that you saved my life, which creates a life debt under Moon Goddess law. And more than that," he hesitated, seeming to struggle for words. "My wolf recognized you the moment you entered that room. Recognized you as mine, as my mate. I know you don't feel the bond yet. Probably won't until we complete it. But I felt it immediately. You're my true mate, Celine, the one the Moon Goddess chose for me." Celine stared at him, her mind struggling to process what he was saying. True mates were rare, the stuff of legends and fairy tales. The idea that she, a former slave with nothing to her name but the clothes on her back and a secret gift she'd hidden her whole life, could be the destined mate of an Alpha King was absurd. "That's not possible," she said, shaking her head. "True mates are 1 in a million. The chances of you just happening to be captured in the same mines where I was held, of me being the one on inspection duty that night, of everything lining up perfectly like that, it's not possible." "The Moon Goddess works in mysterious ways," Thorn said with a slight smile. "Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was divine intervention. Maybe it was just incredibly lucky coincidence. But it doesn't change what I felt when I saw you, what my wolf knew the moment you touched me. You're mine, Celine, and I'm yours. That's not ownership. That's partnership. That's 2 halves of one soul finally finding each other." Celine wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, wanted to deny the small part of her that felt something when he spoke, something warm and right and terrifying. But before she could say anything, Thorn tensed, his nostrils flaring as he scented the air. "We need to move now," he said, voice suddenly hard. "There are wolves coming, at least 10 of them. Ravenclaw hunting party." They ran, Thorn's hand tight around Celine's wrist as he pulled her through the forest at a pace she couldn't have maintained on her own. Behind them, she could hear crashing through the undergrowth, could hear the howls of wolves on the hunt. The Ravenclaw pack had realized their prize prisoner was gone, and they were not happy about it. "I can't outrun them," Celine gasped, her lungs burning, her legs shaking with exertion. "Thorn, I'm not a warrior. I'm just an Omega. You need to leave me and save yourself." "Not happening," Thorn growled, pulling her behind a massive oak tree and pinning her against the trunk with his body. His ice-blue eyes had begun to glow with his wolf's presence, his canines elongating slightly as he spoke. "Listen to me very carefully. We don't have time to outrun them, but we have another option. A temporary blood bond. A what? Celine's eyes widened in alarm. An ancient ritual, rarely used nowadays. It would connect us, allow you to draw on my strength, my speed, my healing. It's temporary, lasting only until the next full moon, but it would give us a chance to escape. His expression was intense, urgent. It requires consent, full, informed consent. I won't force this on you. Celine could hear the hunting party getting closer, could hear the Alpha leading them shouting orders to surround and capture. They had minutes, maybe less. What's the catch? There's always a catch with ancient rituals. It creates a mental link. You'll feel what I feel to an extent, know what I know to an extent, and I'll have the same with you. Thorne's voice was low, rushed. Some secrets may be shared. Some memories. It's unpredictable what transfers through the bond. Her secrets, her ability to touch silver without burning, her deepest fears and wishes. The thought of someone else having access to those parts of her was terrifying. But the alternative was capture, torture, and death, not just for her, but for Thorne as well. And if he died, there would be no army coming back to free the others, no hope for those still enslaved. Will it hurt? She asked, her decision already made. Yes, Thorne answered honestly, but not for long. Do it, Celine said, raising her chin. But I have a condition. When this is over, when we're safe, you keep your promise. You come back for the others. You free every slave in those mines. I swear it, Thorne said, his eyes never leaving hers. On my honor as Alpha King and on the moon goddess herself, I will free them all. He sliced his palm open with a claw, blood welling up black in the dim forest light. He took Celine's hand and did the same to her, the pain sharp but brief. Before she could react, he pressed their bleeding palms together, intertwining their fingers, and began to speak in an ancient language she didn't recognize but somehow understood. Blood to blood, strength to strength, soul to soul. In darkness bound, in moonlight freed. Until the full moon rises thrice, we are one. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Heat raced up Celine's arm from where their blood mingled, spreading through her entire body in a rush that made her gasp. She could feel Thorne's presence in her mind, a warm, powerful energy that seemed to fill spaces she hadn't known were empty. She could sense his emotions, his determination, his fear for her safety rather than his own. And beneath it all, a certainty about her that shook her to her core. He truly believed she was his true mate, believed it with every fiber of his being. The conviction of it washed over her like a tidal wave, threatening to drown her in its intensity. And he could sense her too, she realized, could feel her doubt, her fear, her fierce independence, and refusal to be owned. She felt him acknowledge those feelings, respect them even as he maintained his own certainty. The ritual complete, Thorne released her hand, but the connection remained, a warm presence in the back of her mind. "Can you feel it?" he asked. And she knew he meant the new strength flowing through her limbs, the enhanced senses, the wolf power that far exceeded what she'd experienced as an Omega. "Yes," Celine whispered, flexing her fingers, feeling the new strength there. Her cuts had already healed, not even a scar remaining. "What now?" "Now," Thorne said, a fierce grin spreading across his face as the howls of their pursuers drew nearer. "We run, and we don't stop until we reach the misty forest. There's a hidden path there, one only Moonhaven wolves know. It will lead us home." They ran. And for the first time in 7 years, Celine felt something like hope. The misty forest earned its name honestly. As Celine and Thorne ran deeper into its embrace, fog rose around them in ghostly tendrils, wrapping the ancient trees in a pearlescent shroud. The temporary blood bond surged through Celine's veins, lending her strength and speed beyond anything she had experienced in her 22 years of life. She could feel Thorne's presence in her mind, a warm current of power and determination that guided her movements when visibility dropped to mere feet ahead. They had lost the Ravenclaw hunting party hours ago, the blood bond allowing them to maintain a punishing pace no normal wolves could match. The fog provided additional cover, confounding scent trails and obscuring tracks. Still, they ran as if death itself pursued them, knowing the Ravenclaw Alpha would not abandon the hunt easily. The loss of an Alpha King prisoner represented both humiliation and danger, too great to ignore. "We're close to the hidden path," Thorn said, his voice low as they finally slowed to catch their breath. "Only those with Moonhaven blood can find it. The Ancient Ones wove protection spells into the very soil." Through their bond, Selene sensed his exhaustion despite the brave front he presented. The silver poisoning remained in his system, weakening him despite the emergency potion and the partial healing he'd managed. 7 days of torture followed by their desperate flight had taken a toll even his alpha constitution couldn't easily overcome. "You need rest," she said, her concern surprising her with its intensity. Was this her own emotion, or something bleeding through their connection? She couldn't tell where her feelings ended and his influence began. "Soon," he promised, placing a hand on a massive oak that looked identical to hundreds of others surrounding them. "First, we need to pass the boundary." He closed his eyes, pressing his palm more firmly against the ancient bark. Selene felt a surge through their bond, a pulse of energy that seemed to flow from Thorn into the tree. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, barely perceptible at first, a soft blue luminescence spread from beneath his hand, tracing intricate patterns in the bark that resembled the phases of the moon. "Blood recognizes blood," Thorn murmured. "The trees remember the Moonhaven bloodline." The glowing lines spread from their tree to others nearby, creating a pathway of blue light cutting through the fog. Selene stared in wonder, having heard stories of old magic, but never witnessed anything like this in her life. The Riverstone Pack had been practical folk, fishers and traders with little connection to the ancient ways. "This is the true path to Moonhaven," Thorn explained, his hand finding hers as they began to follow the illuminated route. "It shifts location daily, visible only to those carrying our bloodline or accompanied by one who does. Even if the Ravenclaw hunters somehow tracked us this far, they would find nothing but endless fog and trees." Selene felt something powerful in his words, a pride in heritage that ran deeper than simple pack loyalty. Through their bond, impressions floated to her consciousness. Generations of Moonhaven wolves guarding ancient knowledge, traditions preserved while other packs abandoned the old ways, a sacred duty to protect what remained of wolf magic in a world that increasingly forgot its existence. They walked for what seemed like hours, the ethereal blue path guiding them through terrain that became increasingly treacherous. Steep ravines and hidden sinkholes bordered their route, natural defenses supplemented by the magical concealment. When they crested a final ridge, the fog parted as if commanded, revealing a view that stole Selene's breath. A vast valley spread before them, bordered by mountains on 3 sides. In its center stood what could only be described as a fortress city, stone walls and towers rising organically from the mountainside as if the earth itself had shaped them. Lights glimmered throughout the structures despite the late hour, and even from this distance, Selene could see wolves in both human and animal forms moving about their business. "Moonhaven," Thorn said, pride evident in his voice, "the last true stronghold of the ancient ways. My home." "It's magnificent," Selene whispered, genuine awe flooding through her. The scale and beauty of the place made the Ravenclaw compound look like a crude encampment in comparison. "And now we must announce our arrival," Thorn said, stepping to the edge of the ridge. He tilted his head back and howled, the sound starting low before climbing to a powerful crescendo that echoed across the valley. It was not the howl of an injured or desperate wolf, but the triumphant call of a king returning to his domain. The response was immediate. Howls rose from the city and surrounding forests, dozens at first, then hundreds joining in a chorus of welcome and relief. Through their bond, Selene felt Thorn's emotions swell at the sound, a complex mixture of pride, responsibility, and homecoming joy that brought unexpected tears to her eyes. Movement in the forest below caught her attention. Wolves were emerging from the trees, racing toward their position with extraordinary speed. The lead wolf, a sleek gray female with unusually long legs, reached them first, shifting seamlessly into human form as she approached. The woman who stood before them was tall and muscular, her dark hair cropped short, her amber eyes assessing Celine with unconcealed suspicion before turning to Thorn with relief. "My king," she said, dropping to one knee briefly before rising. "We feared the worst when you disappeared. The council was 3 days from declaring war on Ravenclaw." "Your timing is excellent as always, Valkyrie," Thorn replied, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. "May I present Celine, formerly of the Riverstone Pack. She freed me from imprisonment and silver torture at great personal risk. She is to be treated with the highest honor and respect." Valkyrie's gaze returned to Celine, sharper now, reassessing. "You freed our king from Ravenclaw? Alone?" Celine met her stare evenly, refusing to be intimidated despite the warrior's obvious power. "He was chained with silver in an abandoned section of the mines. I found him and cut him loose. There was no one else to help." "She bears a temporary blood bond with me," Thorn added, and Celine felt his approval through their connection. "It was necessary for our escape." This information visibly startled Valkyrie, her composure slipping for just a moment before she controlled her expression once more. "I see. Then she is indeed due our respect." She inclined her head toward Celine, not quite a bow but an acknowledgement nonetheless. "Welcome to Moonhaven, Celine of Riverstone. I am Valkyrie, Alpha of the Elite Guard." By now, more wolves had arrived, several shifting to human form while others remained as wolves, forming a protective circle around their king. Celine felt their curious gazes, heard their whispered questions. Who was this strange female? Why did she bear the king's blood bond? What had happened in Ravenclaw territory? "Explanations can wait," Thorn said, addressing the gathered wolves. "I require healing, food, and rest in that order. Celine needs the same, full council meeting at midday tomorrow." "Of course, my king," Valkyrie signaled to several guards who moved forward to support Thorn. He wavered slightly as he relinquished Celine's hand, the exertion of maintaining their pace and activating the ancient path having depleted his remaining strength. Celine felt his reluctance to show weakness before his pack, his determination to walk into Moonhaven under his own power despite the pain and exhaustion threatening to overwhelm him. Through their bond, she sent him what strength she could spare, an instinctive act that surprised her even as she did it. His ice-blue eyes found hers, gratitude and something deeper reflected there. "Walk with me," he said, and it was not a command, but a request. Side by side, they descended the path toward Moonhaven, the elite guards forming an honor guard around them. News of their arrival spread ahead of them like wildfire. By the time they reached the massive stone gates of the city, wolves lined the main thoroughfare, shifting between forms in their excitement, howls and cheers rising to greet their returned king. Celine felt conspicuous beside Thorn, acutely aware of her ragged clothing and the dirt of the mines still embedded in her skin. 7 years of hiding, of making herself invisible, had not prepared her for being the center of such intense scrutiny. She could feel the wolves' curiosity, their questions about who she was and what she meant to their king. Through the bond, Thorn sensed her discomfort. "Hold your head high," his voice came softly, meant for her alone. "You saved an alpha king when you could have left me to die. Never forget that strength." They passed through winding streets paved with smooth river stones, buildings of gray granite and dark wood rising on either side. The architecture was unlike anything Celine had seen, structures that seemed to grow naturally from the mountainside rather than being imposed upon it. Everything conveyed permanence and harmony with the surrounding landscape, a stark contrast to the utilitarian ugliness of the Ravenclaw compound. The path widened as they approached what could only be the palace, though that word seemed insufficient for the structure before them. Carved directly into the mountain face, its multiple levels and towers followed the natural contours of the stone, windows and balconies positioned to capture both sunlight and moonlight throughout their cycles. Ancient runes, similar to those Celine had seen on Thorn's silver chains, adorned archways and columns. though these glowed with a soft blue light rather than the malevolent purple of the binding runes. The great hall they entered hummed with activity, wolves hurrying to attend their returned king. A tall, silver-haired man who appeared ancient, even by wolf standards, approached, relief evident in his weathered features. "My king," he said, his voice surprisingly strong despite his apparent age. "The moon goddess has answered our prayers." "Elder Gideon," Thorn acknowledged with genuine respect. "It seems my time to join the ancestors has not yet arrived." "Indeed not," the elder replied, his gaze shifting to Celine with undisguised curiosity. "And who might this be who returns with you?" "This is Celine," Thorn said, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "She freed me from silver chains and certain death. She bears a temporary blood bond with me necessary for our escape. She is to be given quarters in the Moon Tower and treated as an honored guest." The elder's eyebrows rose slightly at the mention of the blood bond, but he merely bowed to Celine. "Then Moonhaven owes you a debt beyond measure, young one. The Moon Tower is reserved for those of special significance to our pack. You will be comfortable there." "Thank you," Celine replied, uncertain of proper protocol, but determined not to appear intimidated. "But I don't require special accommodation. Any quarters would be sufficient." "Nonsense," Elder Gideon said with unexpected warmth. "The savior of our king deserves nothing less. But first, both of you require healing. Freya has been alerted and awaits in the royal chambers." Thorn nodded, clearly relieved at the mention of the healer. He turned to Celine, and she felt his conflict through their bond. He did not wish to leave her alone among strangers, yet his condition required immediate attention. "Go," she said, answering his unspoken concern. "I'll be fine." "Valkyrie will escort you to the Moon Tower once you've been seen by Freya as well," Thorn said. "We'll speak more tomorrow, after the council meeting." He departed with Elder Gideon and several attendants, leaving Celine with Valkyrie and 2 other elite guards. The warrior woman gestured for Celine to follow, leading her through a different corridor of the palace. "The king's wounds appear severe," Valkyrie commented as they walked. "What exactly did they do to him?" "Silver chains with binding runes," Celine answered, the memory still fresh and horrifying. "Layers of them, burning into his skin, preventing shifting and healing. He was left to die slowly in an abandoned section of the mines." Valkyrie's expression darkened. "And you found him by chance?" "I was on inspection duty in the deep mines. I heard sounds from a sealed tunnel and investigated." "At great risk to yourself," Valkyrie noted, studying Celine with renewed interest. "Most slaves would not dare such a thing." "Most slaves have nothing left to lose," Celine replied simply. They arrived at what appeared to be a healing chamber, though far more elaborate than anything Celine had seen. Herbs hung from the ceiling, their aromatic scents filling the air. Crystals of various colors were positioned strategically around the room, catching and refracting light in patterns that seemed purposeful rather than decorative. Shelves lined the walls, filled with bottles, jars, and ancient-looking texts. A small woman with wild, curly white hair stood grinding something in a mortar, her back to them as they entered. Without turning, she spoke. "So this is the one who saved our stubborn king from his own diplomatic foolishness." "Freya," Valkyrie acknowledged, with a mixture of respect and wariness. "This is Celine, formerly of Riverstone." The woman turned, revealing a face less aged than her white hair had suggested. Her green eyes were sharp and clear, seeming to look through Celine rather than at her. "Riverstone," she repeated thoughtfully. "The river pack destroyed by Ravenclaw 7 years ago. You've survived their mines all this time?" Celine nodded, unnerved by the woman's penetrating gaze. "And now you bear our king's blood bond," Freya continued, circling Celine slowly. "The first in over a century. Fascinating." She stopped abruptly, nostrils flaring slightly. "You require healing as well. Not from silver, obviously, but exhaustion, malnutrition, and—" She peered closer at Celine's arms, where faint scars from years in the mines marked her skin. "Old wounds never properly treated." "I'm fine," Celine insisted, uncomfortable with the scrutiny. Thorn needs help more than I do. Thorn is already being tended to by my apprentices, Freya said dismissively. And a wise healer never ignores one patient for another. She gestured to a stone table covered with soft furs. Sit. This won't take long. Valkyrie moved toward the door. I'll return when Freya has finished. You're in good hands, though her bedside manner leaves much to be desired. Left alone with the healer, Selene reluctantly sat on the table. Freya worked in silence for several minutes, grinding herbs and minerals into various pastes and potions. Finally, she approached with a steaming cup that smelled of pine and something Selene couldn't identify. Drink, Freya commanded. All of it. The liquid tasted better than it smelled, warming Selene from within as she swallowed. Almost immediately, she felt the aches of their journey beginning to fade, replaced by a pleasant heaviness in her limbs. The blood bond, Freya said abruptly as she began applying a salve to Selene's more recent cuts and bruises. How much did our king explain before performing it? Very little, Selene admitted. We were being pursued. There wasn't time. Freya made a disapproving noise. Typical. Even in crisis, certain protocols should be observed. She fixed Selene with that unsettling green gaze. The bond creates a temporary connection between your life forces. You share strength, accelerated healing, and to some extent, thoughts and emotions. It will fade with the full moon 3 weeks from now. I understand that much, Selene said. What I don't understand is why he chose this solution. Surely he could have escaped on his own once free from the chains. Perhaps, Freya conceded, her hands continuing their work. But silver poisoning is insidious. Without the bond, he might have collapsed before reaching our territory. Besides, her lips curved in a knowing smile, blood bonds are typically reserved for those with special connections. Before Selene could question this cryptic statement, Freya's hands stilled on her forearm, her expression shifting to one of intense focus. Her fingers traced a pattern of thin white scars barely visible against Selene's pale skin. These marks, Freya said slowly. They're from prolonged silver contact. Selene tensed, instinctively pulling her arm away. I worked in the silver mines for 7 years. Everyone has scars. Not like these. Freya recaptured her arm, turning it to examine the patterns more closely. These aren't burns, they're calloused handling marks. You've touched raw silver repeatedly without gloves, without burning. Selene's heart raced. Her most closely guarded secret, discovered within hours of arriving at Moonhaven. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Freya's voice dropped to a whisper. You're silver blessed. You can touch silver without immediate burning. It's an incredibly rare gift, perhaps 1 in 10,000 wolves. She looked up, excitement lighting her features. This is how you freed our king, isn't it? You handled the silver chains directly. Trapped by the truth, Selene nodded reluctantly. My grandmother told me never to tell anyone, said people would use me if they knew. Your grandmother was wise, Freya said, releasing her arm. Silver-blessed wolves have been exploited throughout history, forced to work in mines or forge silver weapons. But here's something she may not have told you. The silver-blessed aren't just immune to silver's effects. With proper training, they can actually manipulate silver, bend it to their will. Some ancient texts suggest they could even purify silver poisoning by drawing the toxin out through touch alone. Selene stared at the healer, disbelief warring with a strange sense of recognition. Her grandmother had died when Selene was 12, taking with her whatever other knowledge she might have possessed about this ability. Are there others like me here? Freya shook her head. Not currently. The last known silver blessed in Moonhaven died over 50 years ago. Your arrival is... She paused, considering her words. Potentially significant, especially given the circumstances. Does Thorn know? Can he sense it through our bond? Unlikely, unless you're actively thinking about it. The bond transfers conscious thoughts more readily than deeper knowledge. Freya fixed her with that penetrating stare once more. Will you tell him? The question hung between them. Celine had kept this secret her entire life, first on her grandmother's instructions, then out of self-preservation in the mines. Revealing it now would make her vulnerable in ways she wasn't sure she could accept. "I don't know," she admitted finally. Freya nodded, seemingly satisfied with this honest uncertainty. "Consider it carefully. Trust is the foundation of any relationship, especially one between potential mates. He should hear it from you, not discover it from another source." "We're not mates," Celine said quickly. "The blood bond is temporary. Once it fades, I'll decide my own path." "Of course," Freya replied, though her tone suggested she thought otherwise. "Now you need rest. The sleeping draft I included in your tea will take effect shortly. Valkyrie will show you to your quarters in the Moon Tower." As if summoned by her name, the warrior woman appeared at the chamber door. "Is she cleared to leave?" "She is," Freya confirmed. "Though she requires food and extended rest, the blood bond will accelerate her healing, but her body has endured years of deprivation. Recovery will take time." Valkyrie nodded and gestured for Celine to follow. The sleeping draft was indeed beginning to take effect, making Celine's limbs heavy and her thoughts fuzzy around the edges. She managed to stay alert enough to note their path through the palace, up several flights of stairs, and across a covered bridge that connected to a separate tower built into the mountainside. "The Moon Tower," Valkyrie explained as they approached ornate doors carved with lunar phases. "Originally built for visiting dignitaries and those under special protection of the Alpha Line. Your rooms are on the 3rd level." The apartments Valkyrie showed her to were more luxurious than anything Celine had ever experienced. Spacious and airy, with large windows overlooking the valley, furnished with beautiful handcrafted pieces that somehow managed to be both elegant and comfortable. A fire already burned in the stone hearth, and a bath had been prepared in an adjoining room. "Clean clothing is provided in the wardrobe," Valkyrie said, indicating a tall wooden cabinet. "Food will be brought shortly. Is there anything else you require?" Celine shook her head, overwhelmed by the sudden transition from slave to honored guest. 7 years of deprivation had not prepared her for such treatment. Valkyrie moved to leave, then paused at the door. "What you did," she said without turning fully, "freeing our king. It was brave. Foolish, perhaps, but brave. Moonhaven won't forget." Before Celine could respond, the warrior was gone, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the growing effects of the sleeping draft. She managed to bathe and dress in the simple but fine clothing provided before collapsing onto the bed, softer than anything she'd felt in 7 years. Sleep claimed her instantly, deep and dreamless. Morning came with sunlight streaming through windows she'd been too exhausted to cover. Celine woke disoriented, momentarily panicked at the unfamiliar surroundings until memory returned. Moonhaven, freedom, the blood bond with Thorn. She reached for that connection instinctively, finding it warm and steady at the edges of her consciousness. Through it, she sensed Thorn was awake, his mind focused and alert, despite lingering pain from his injuries. He sensed her awareness in return, a brief acknowledgement flowing between them before his attention returned to whatever occupied him. A soft knock at her door revealed a young female wolf bearing a tray of food. The girl, who introduced herself as Lena, explained she had been assigned as Celine's attendant during her stay. The concept of having a personal servant made Celine deeply uncomfortable, but she accepted the arrangement temporarily, not wishing to offend. After eating her first proper meal in years, Celine explored her new quarters more thoroughly. The wardrobe contained clothing in various styles, all in her size. How they had managed this overnight was a mystery, though she suspected magic played a role. The thought reminded her of Freya's revelations about her silver-blessed status and the decision she faced regarding telling Thorn. Another knock interrupted her thoughts. This time it was Valkyrie, formal in what appeared to be ceremonial armor, polished silver accents gleaming against dark leather. "The king requests your presence at the council meeting," she announced without preamble. "It begins within the hour." Celine frowned. "I'm not part of your council. Surely state matters don't concern me." "You freed our king from enemy territory and bear his blood bond," Valkyrie replied with a raised eyebrow. "That makes you very much the council's concern. Besides, Your first-hand knowledge of Ravenclaw's operations will be valuable." Realizing argument would be pointless, Celine selected appropriate clothing from the wardrobe, a simple but elegant tunic and leggings in deep blue with silver accents, Moonhaven's colors. As she dressed, she felt a subtle nudge through the blood bond, Thorne's consciousness touching hers briefly, a sensation almost like reassurance. Valkyrie escorted her through the palace to an imposing circular chamber deep within the mountain. A round table of polished stone dominated the space, with 12 ornately carved chairs positioned around it. Thorne already occupied the largest chair, looking remarkably recovered compared to his condition the previous day. Silver scars still marked his exposed skin where the chains had burned deepest, but his ice-blue eyes were clear and alert, his posture straight and powerful. Those eyes found Celine immediately as she entered, and she felt a surge of emotion through their bond, too complex to decipher fully. Relief, admiration, concern, and something deeper that she deliberately avoided examining too closely. "Celine," he greeted, rising from his seat. The other council members, a mixture of males and females of varying ages, rose as well. "Thank you for joining us. Your perspective will be invaluable." She took the empty chair indicated, directly to Thorne's right, a position of honor that did not go unnoticed by the others present. Elder Gideon, seated at Thorne's left, offered an encouraging smile. "Before we begin," Thorne addressed the full council, "let me formally introduce Celine, formerly of the Riverstone Pack. As many of you have heard, she freed me from imprisonment and torture at great personal risk. Without her intervention, I would have died in the abandoned mines of Ravenclaw territory. She bears a temporary blood bond with me, which was necessary for our escape. She is to be accorded all respect and courtesy during her stay with us." Murmurs of acknowledgement circulated the table, though Celine noticed varying degrees of acceptance in the council members' expressions. Some showed genuine gratitude, others thinly veiled suspicion, and at least one, a severe-looking older woman, outright hostility. "Now," Thorne continued, "to business. I'll share what I learned during my captivity. Then we must discuss our response to Ravenclaw's betrayal of diplomatic protocol." The meeting progressed with Thorne providing a detailed account of his capture during what was supposed to be peace negotiations. The Ravenclaw Alpha, a wolf named Drayson, had violated the sacred white flag of truce, ambushing Thorne and his small honor guard. The guards had been killed immediately, while Thorne was taken prisoner for a slower death. "Their intention was to make my death appear as an accident during negotiations," Thorne explained. "Hence the abandoned mine location, where my body would likely never be found. With me gone, they believed Moonhaven would be vulnerable to territorial expansion." As the council members expressed outrage at the violation of ancient pack law, many calling for immediate military action, Thorne listened to all perspectives before turning to Celine. "You've lived within their territory for 7 years. What can you tell us about their current strength and operations?" Celine took a deep breath, organizing her thoughts. The Ravenclaw pack has grown significantly in the past 3 years. More warriors, more territory claimed. The slave population in the mines has doubled, with captives brought in from at least 5 different conquered packs that I know of. She proceeded to provide details on guard rotations, weapon stockpiles, and the layout of the main compound, information she had gathered during years of careful observation while making herself appear oblivious. The council members listened with increasing respect as she demonstrated knowledge that would be invaluable in any conflict. "And what of Drayson himself?" Elder Gideon asked. "What can you tell us of the Ravenclaw Alpha?" "He rarely came to the mines personally," Celine replied. "But when he did, everyone feared him. He's cruel for cruelty's sake, not just as a means of control. He's also increasingly erratic. The guards whispered that he's been consulting with dark shamans, practitioners of blood magic." This information caused visible concern among several council members. Blood magic was forbidden by the ancient laws, considered a corruption of the natural order. "If Drayson is dabbling in forbidden arts, the threat is greater than we realized," Elder Gideon said gravely. "Blood magic requires sacrifice, and rarely of the willing kind." "All the more reason to strike quickly," argued a battle-scarred male wolf, "before he amasses more power." Discussion continued, strategies proposed and debated. Throughout, Celine observed the dynamics of the council, noting who held real influence beyond their formal positions. She also became increasingly aware of one particular council member, a sleek female with calculating eyes, who said little but watched everything with unusual intensity. During a brief recess, when refreshments were brought in and council members spoke in smaller groups, Celine felt a strange sensation through the blood bond. A warning, though from Thorn or from the bond itself, she couldn't tell. Her gaze was drawn to a conversation between the quiet female council member and one of the servants. The exchange appeared casual, but something in their body language triggered Celine's survival instincts, honed by years of observing guards for signs of danger. The servant departed with an empty tray, and the council member returned to her seat, expression neutral. When the meeting resumed, Thorn announced his decision. "We will prepare for war, but not strike immediately. First, we will gather our allies, the packs who have stood with Moonhaven in past conflicts. Together we will present Drayson with an ultimatum: release all slaves and withdraw from territories seized in the past 5 years, or face the combined might of the northern packs." Some council members appeared disappointed by this measured approach, while others nodded approval. The quiet female spoke for the first time. "A wise decision, my king. Ravenclaw has allies of its own. We must ensure numerical superiority before engaging." Something about her tone set Celine's instincts screaming. Through the bond, she felt Thorn's attention shift subtly, his awareness of her sudden tension. "Indeed, Counselor Lyssa," Thorn replied smoothly. "Your insights on diplomatic matters have always been valuable. Perhaps you would take charge of our communications with potential allies." "It would be my honor," Lyssa responded, with a gracious inclination of her head. The meeting concluded shortly thereafter, with tasks assigned and preparations set in motion. As council members filed out, Thorn placed a hand lightly on Celine's arm, signaling her to remain. When they were alone, except for Valkyrie standing guard at the door, he spoke quietly. "You noticed something during the recess." It wasn't a question. Celine nodded, keeping her voice equally low. "The counselor, Lyssa. Something about her interaction with the servant felt wrong, secretive." Thorn's expression remained neutral, but through their bond, Celine felt his sharp interest. "Explain." "It's difficult to articulate," Celine admitted. "Body language primarily, the way they positioned themselves to block view from certain angles, the servant's departure path, which took him past 3 other council members he could have collected empty cups from but didn't. Small things that wouldn't register unless you'd spent years watching for danger signals. As you have," Thorn said thoughtfully. "Survival in the mines required constant vigilance." "Yes." He was silent a moment, considering. Lyssa was the most vocal advocate for diplomatic engagement with Ravenclaw initially. She arranged many of the details for the peace negotiation that ended with my capture. "That doesn't necessarily mean anything," Celine pointed out. "She might simply favor peaceful solutions." "True, but your instincts, combined with certain inconsistencies I've noted." He glanced toward Valkyrie. "Increase surveillance on Counselor Lyssa and her household staff, discreetly." The warrior woman nodded once and departed, leaving them truly alone in the council chamber. Thorn's gaze returned to Celine, his expression softening. "How are you finding Moonhaven so far?" The abrupt shift to personal matters caught Celine off guard. "It's overwhelming," she admitted. "Everything is so different from the mines, from anywhere I've been." "Good different, I hope." "Mostly." She hesitated, then added, "The Moon Tower quarters are too grand. I'm not accustomed to such luxury." "Would you prefer simpler accommodations?" "No, She struggled to articulate her discomfort. "I'm not ungrateful. I just don't understand why I'm being treated with such distinction. I did what anyone with conscience would do." Thorn's smile held a touch of sadness. "You underestimate the rarity of conscience, especially in times of personal danger." He rose from his seat, moving to look out the chamber's single window. "Walk with me? The gardens are particularly beautiful this time of year, and you've seen little but the inside of this mountain since your arrival." Celine agreed, grateful for the chance to escape the confines of the palace, however magnificent it might be. 7 years underground had given her a profound appreciation for open sky. They walked in companionable silence through corridors and halls, eventually emerging onto a terrace overlooking cascading gardens built into the mountainside. The sight stopped Celine in her tracks. Flowers in colors she had forgotten existed spread before her in carefully planned yet seemingly natural arrangements. Water features caught sunlight in dancing patterns, and butterflies flitted between blooms. The air was rich with fragrance, clean and sweet after the stale dust of the mines. "I'd forgotten," she whispered, emotion tightening her throat. "How beautiful the world can be." Thorn said nothing, but through their bond, she felt his reaction to her wonder, a mixture of pleasure at providing this moment and deep anger at what had been stolen from her. They descended stone steps into the gardens proper, following winding paths through the vibrant displays. They attracted attention, of course. The Alpha King rarely walked the gardens, and never with an unknown female bearing his blood bond. Wolves stopped their activities to bow respectfully, curiosity evident in their gazes. Thorn acknowledged them with nods but continued walking, leading Celine to a more secluded section where a stone bench overlooked the valley below. "I come here to think sometimes," he said as they sat, "when decisions weigh heavily." "And do they? Weigh heavily?" He nodded, his expression growing distant. "Always. Every choice affects thousands of lives. Peace or war, traditional ways or adaptation. The burden of rule is knowing that mistakes cost blood, not just your own." The raw honesty surprised her. Through their bond, she felt the weight he carried, the constant awareness of responsibility that never fully abated even in moments of apparent relaxation. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked quietly. Thorn turned to face her fully, those ice-blue eyes intense. "Because I want you to understand who I am before you decide your path once the blood bond fades. I am not just a wolf, not just an alpha. I am the last of the ancient blood, carrier of traditions and power that predate written history. My life is not my own, has never been my own. And what does that have to do with me? When I said you were my true mate," he continued as if she hadn't spoken, "it wasn't a claim of ownership, it was recognition. In that cell, dying by inches, I felt your approach before you ever entered the room. My wolf knew you, Celine, knew you in a way that transcends rational explanation." Celine shifted uncomfortably. "You were delirious from silver poisoning, desperate for rescue." "Is that what you truly believe? Search the bond between us. You feel it too, though you fight against it." She wanted to deny it, wanted to dismiss his words as the romantic notions of an alpha accustomed to getting what he wanted. But the blood bond between them made deception impossible. There was something there, something that had been present from the moment she entered that abandoned chamber, a recognition that defied her attempts to ignore it. "Even if that were true," she said carefully, "I spent 7 years as property. I won't trade one form of captivity for another, no matter how gilded the cage." "I'm not offering a cage," Thorn replied, frustration edging his voice. "I'm offering partnership, equals in all things. I would no more control you than cut off my own arm." "Pretty words," Celine said, unable to keep bitterness from her tone. But reality seldom matches declaration when power imbalances exist. You are an Alpha King. I am a former slave with nothing to my name. "You have more than you know," Thorn said cryptically, "including the ability to resist silver that you've hidden your entire life." Celine froze, shock and betrayal washing through her. "How did you—" "Not through the bond," he assured her quickly. "Freya reported it this morning as her duty requires. She's our head healer, but also sworn to inform the Alpha of anything that might affect pack security." "And my ability affects pack security?" Celine's voice had gone cold. "The Silver Blessed are rare and valuable," Thorn explained. "Historically, they've been targeted by packs seeking advantage in wars. Freya was protecting you by ensuring I knew." Celine stood abruptly, anger and fear churning inside her. So now I'm a strategic asset to be protected? Another resource for your pack? No. Thorn rose as well, frustration evident in his stance. That's not what I meant. Celine, please. I'm handling this poorly. Yes, you are. She turned to leave, then stopped, forcing herself to think past her emotional reaction. This wasn't the mines. Running wouldn't solve anything. She faced him again, controlling her voice with effort. I planned to tell you myself. I was working up the courage. Finding out you already knew feels like my choices keep being taken from me. Thorn's expression softened with understanding. You're right. I should have waited for you to tell me in your own time. I apologize. The simple acknowledgement of her feelings, offered without defensiveness, deflated some of Celine's anger. Few alphas would admit error so readily, particularly to someone of lower status. I don't know how to do this, she admitted after a moment. How to be free. How to make choices that affect only me. How to trust that those choices won't be overridden by someone stronger. I don't have easy answers, Thorn said honestly. All I can offer is time. Time to heal, to learn who you are outside of captivity. Time to decide what you want your life to be. The blood bond lasts 3 more weeks. Use that time however you wish. Explore Moonhaven. Learn about your abilities from Freya. Avoid me entirely if that's your preference. But please don't make assumptions about my intentions based on your experience with Ravenclaw. I am not Drayson. Through their bond, Celine felt the sincerity behind his words, the genuine desire to give her space to find herself. It was unexpected from an alpha of his standing. Alphas took what they wanted. They commanded rather than requested. Yet here was Thorn, the most powerful alpha in 500 miles, essentially asking her permission to court her. I would like to learn more about my ability, she said finally. Freya mentioned training, ways to use the silver resistance beyond simple immunity. Then train with Freya, Thorn encouraged. She's demanding but knowledgeable. Our archives contain extensive information on the Silver Blessed, records dating back centuries. And in exchange? There is no exchange, he said firmly. This isn't a transaction. You saved my life. You're entitled to anything Moonhaven can provide, with no obligation in return. Before Celine could respond, a commotion at the garden entrance caught their attention. Valkyrie approached rapidly, her expression grave. My king, she said with a quick bow, we have a situation. Refugees from the mines have arrived at our border. They claim to know Celine. Celine's heart lurched. The slaves I warned? They made it here? Some did, Valkyrie confirmed. They're being brought to the south gate now. Without waiting for permission, Celine was running, following Valkyrie through the gardens and down paths toward the southern entrance to Moonhaven. Thorn kept pace beside her, his longer stride easily matching her desperate speed. Through their bond, she felt his concern, not for security, but for her emotional state. The refugees were a sorry sight. 12 wolves in total, dirty and exhausted, clearly having traveled without rest since their escape. Among them, Celine recognized Vera, the elderly Omega who had been her first friend in captivity, and young Eli, now 12 but still painfully thin from years of deprivation. Lyra and Cain, the bonded pair, supported each other as they always had. "Celine!" Eli cried when he spotted her, breaking from the group to run toward her. She caught him in an embrace, tears threatening as she felt how little he weighed, even after 7 years. "You made it," she whispered against his hair. "You actually made it." "We ran, like you said," he replied, pulling back to look at her with eyes too old for his years. "The guards were confused at first. By the time they organized a search, we had a good head start, but others weren't so lucky." His young face darkened. "They caught some of us, made examples." Celine closed her eyes briefly, grief washing through her for those who hadn't escaped. She felt Thorn's hand on her shoulder, offering silent support. "You're safe now," she assured Eli and the others. "All of you. Moonhaven has given me sanctuary, and they'll extend the same to you." "Indeed," Thorn confirmed, addressing the refugees directly. You are welcome in Moonhaven for as long as you wish to stay. You will never be slaves again." Vera approached slowly, her aged frame bent with exhaustion, but her eyes sharp as ever. She looked from Celine to Thorn and back again, noting their proximity and the unconscious way they oriented toward each other. "So it's true," the old woman said quietly. "What the guards were saying after you disappeared. You took up with the Wolf King." Celine felt heat rise to her cheeks. "It's not what you think. I helped him escape, that's all." Vera's knowing smile suggested she believed otherwise, but she didn't press the issue. "We bring grave news, besides our own escape. Drayson has accelerated his plans. He's gathering forces, calling in allies from the southern packs. There's talk of dark rituals, blood sacrifices in the deepest parts of the mines." This information sent a ripple of tension through the Moonhaven wolves present. Thorn's expression remained controlled, but Celine felt his alarm through their bond. "You are certain of this?" he asked Vera. "As certain as one can be of information gathered from guard gossip," the old woman replied. "But the signs are there, slaves disappearing from the common quarters, never returning. Strange howls from beneath the mountains on moonless nights. Drayson himself changed, more volatile, his eyes sometimes glowing purple instead of alpha red. Purple. The color of the binding runes on Thorn's chains. A cold dread settled in Celine's stomach as pieces began connecting. Blood magic, silver chains with ancient runes, Drayson's increasingly erratic behavior. "We need to speak with the council," she said urgently to Thorn. "Now!" He nodded, already signaling to Valkyrie. "See that our guests receive food, clean clothing, and medical attention," he instructed. "Then convene the council for an emergency session." As the refugees were led away with promises of care, Thorn and Celine returned to the palace at a rapid pace. The blood bond between them hummed with shared concern, their thoughts aligned without need for words. If Drayson was indeed practicing blood magic, sacrificing slaves for power, the threat was far greater than a territorial dispute. Such forbidden arts corrupted mind and soul, eventually transforming the practitioner into something no longer wolf, no longer human. Something ancient texts called skin rippers, beings of pure malevolence that fed on pain and fear. The urgency of their situation had just increased exponentially. But so had something else, Celine realized as they walked, a sense of purpose, of belonging that she had not experienced since the destruction of her birth pack. Despite her reservations, despite her fears about freedom and choice, she found herself thinking of Moonhaven and its wolves as something to protect, something worth fighting for. And at her side walked Thorn, the Alpha King who offered partnership instead of ownership, who apologized when wrong, who treated former slaves with dignity. The wolf her grandmother had once told her would come, in stories Celine had long dismissed as childish fantasy. "The one who will break your chains will bear scars of his own," her grandmother had whispered on starlit nights, "and together you will forge something stronger than silver, more enduring than moonlight." For the first time in 7 years, Celine allowed herself to consider that perhaps, just perhaps, those old stories held more truth than she had been willing to believe. The council chamber pulsed with tension as Elder Gideon laid out ancient scrolls across the stone table. Illuminated by crystal lamps, the yellowed parchment revealed diagrams of ritualistic circles, strange symbols, and anatomical drawings that made even the hardened warriors among them shift uncomfortably. Celine studied the texts from her position beside Thorn, the blood bond between them humming with shared concern. "Blood magic," Elder Gideon explained, his weathered finger tracing a particular symbol that matched descriptions from the escaped slaves. Specifically, the ritual of ascension. It was forbidden millennia ago when the first wolf packs formed their alliance. The ritual promises transformation beyond alpha status into something the ancients called Cruor Rex, the Blood King. "What exactly is a Blood King?" Valkyrie asked, her hand resting instinctively on her sword hilt. "A perversion of our nature," Thorn answered before the elder could speak. "An alpha who consumes the life force of others to transcend natural limitations. Neither fully wolf nor human, but something other. Something that feeds on pain and fear." Celine felt a chill travel down her spine as memories surfaced. "The missing slaves," she said quietly. "The ones who disappeared from the common quarters and never returned. He was sacrificing them." "The ritual requires 9 sacrifices over 9 moonless nights," Elder Gideon continued, turning to another scroll. "Each victim must be an Omega with some special quality or ability. The final sacrifice must be performed during a lunar eclipse." "When is the next eclipse?" Thorne asked, his voice tightly controlled. 17 days from now." The implications settled heavily on the council. If Drayson completed the ritual, he would possess power beyond any normal alpha. Even Thorne, with his ancient bloodline, might not be able to stand against such corrupted strength. "We cannot wait to gather allies," Thorne decided, rising from his seat. "The threat is too immediate. We must strike Ravenclaw territory directly, disrupt the ritual before the final sacrifice." "My king!" Counselor Lissa interjected, her voice smooth as silk. "Such a direct assault would leave Moonhaven vulnerable. Perhaps a smaller force? A strategic strike team?" Celine watched the counselor carefully, noting how her suggestion seemed reasonable on its surface, yet would effectively reduce Moonhaven's chances of success. Through the blood bond, she felt Thorne's awareness of the same calculation. "Your concern for Moonhaven's safety is admirable, Counselor," Thorne replied evenly, "but a strike team would face overwhelming odds. No, we will commit our full fighting force, with a smaller elite team to penetrate the ritual site, while our main army engages their defenses." Lissa's smile never faltered, though Celine detected the slight tightening around her eyes that betrayed frustration. "Of course, my king. Your wisdom guides us all." The meeting continued with tactical discussions, resource allocation, and assignment of responsibilities. Throughout, Celine remained silent, absorbing information while observing the subtle dynamics between council members. She noted with interest that while Thorne solicited opinions from everyone present, he frequently glanced her way, gauging her reactions through their bond. As the council adjourned, Thorne requested Celine remain behind along with Valkyrie and Elder Gideon. When the chamber had emptied of other members, he turned to her directly. "You've been unusually quiet." "I was listening," Celine replied simply. "Learning." "And what did you learn?" She hesitated only briefly. "Counselor Lysa is working against you. Her suggestions consistently aim to minimize our chances of success while appearing supportive." Valkyrie nodded in agreement. "My surveillance has confirmed unusual communications between her household and unknown parties outside our territory. Nothing conclusive yet, but concerning." "We cannot afford divided loyalty with what lies ahead," Thorne said, his expression grim. "Valkyrie, increase your surveillance but take no action yet. We need proof before confronting a council member." The warrior woman acknowledged the order with a sharp nod before departing to her duties. Elder Gideon remained, his ancient eyes studying Celine with undisguised interest. "The Silver Blessed were instrumental in defeating the last Blood King over 1,000 years ago," he said without preamble. "Their ability to manipulate silver allowed them to forge weapons capable of severing the corrupted connection between the Blood King and his sacrificed victims." Celine frowned. "I can touch silver without burning, but I know nothing of manipulating it." "Which is why you must begin training immediately," Thorne said. "Freya has agreed to instruct you. The archives contain texts specifically addressing the techniques." "You expect me to master an ability I didn't know I had in less than 3 weeks?" Celine's doubt was evident in her voice. "I expect you to try," Thorne answered simply. "The blood bond between us will accelerate your learning. I can lend you strength, focus, and some of my own connection to ancient powers." Elder Gideon nodded in agreement. "The bond creates a pathway that strengthens innate abilities. It's one reason such bonds were common in ancient times, particularly during crises." Celine considered this information, weighing her limited options. She had escaped one prison only to find herself facing another crisis, another fight for survival. Yet this time was different. This time, she chose her path freely, with allies who valued her for more than her labor. "I'll train with Freya," she agreed finally. "But I want to be included in the mission planning as well. I know those mines better than anyone here except the other escaped slaves." "Agreed," Thorne said without hesitation. "Your knowledge will be crucial." Elder Gideon excused himself with a respectful bow, leaving Thorne and Selene alone in the council chamber. For a moment neither spoke, the bond between them transmitting emotions too complex for simple words: concern, determination, and something deeper, something that grew stronger with each passing day, despite Selene's attempts to guard against it. "You don't have to do this," Thorne said finally, breaking the silence. "You've suffered enough at Ravenclaw's hands. No one would fault you for choosing safety over further confrontation." "Wouldn't they?" Selene's voice held no bitterness, merely pragmatism. "I'm the Silver Blessed, apparently crucial to defeating this Blood King. The choice seems rather predetermined." "There is always choice," Thorne insisted, stepping closer. "I would rather face Drayson alone than force you back into danger." The sincerity in his voice, reflected through their bond, caught Selene off guard. 7 years of captivity had taught her to expect exploitation of her usefulness. Thorne's willingness to prioritize her well-being over tactical advantage was unsettling in its novelty. "The slaves still in those mines," she said quietly. "They have no choice, no freedom to walk away from danger. If I can help free them, how could I choose otherwise?" Thorne's ice-blue eyes softened with understanding and something that might have been pride. "Then we face this together, as equals." "As allies," Selene corrected, unwilling to commit to anything more permanent while so much remained uncertain. "As allies," Thorne agreed, though his small smile suggested he heard the unspoken qualification in her amendment. Training with Freya began that same afternoon. The healing chamber had been transformed, silver implements of various sizes arranged on cloth-covered tables, ancient texts open to specific illustrations. Freya herself seemed energized by the challenge, her usual brusque manner tempered with scholarly excitement. "The Silver Blessed don't merely resist silver's effects," she explained, as Selene examined a silver dagger with curious fingers. "They can sense its presence, direct its energy, even reshape it with sufficient training. The texts speak of silver blessed healers who could draw silver poisoning from a victim's blood through touch alone." "That seems impossible," Selene said skeptically. "Many things seem impossible until accomplished," Freya replied with a dismissive wave. "Now close your eyes and hold the dagger. Don't just touch it, feel it. Silver has memory, consciousness of a sort. It remembers the earth it came from, the hands that shaped it." Selene complied, feeling somewhat foolish as she gripped the ceremonial dagger and closed her eyes. At first she sensed nothing beyond the cool metal against her skin, but as minutes passed and Freya continued murmuring instructions, subtle sensations began to register. A faint vibration, a warmth that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat, a whispering at the edges of her consciousness, too faint to interpret but undeniably present. "I feel something," she admitted, "but I don't understand it." "Understanding comes with time," Freya assured her. "For now, simply acknowledge the connection. Silver knows you are kin to it in some fundamental way. The metals in your blood recognize the metal in your hand." Day after day, the training intensified. Selene progressed from simply sensing silver to influencing its temperature, making it warm or cool at will. Then came movement, causing small silver beads to roll across tables without physical touch. The blood bond with Thorne accelerated her progress considerably, his ancient connection to wolf magic flowing through their shared link to enhance her natural abilities. Between training sessions, Selene participated in war councils, contributing her intimate knowledge of the Ravenclaw mines. Maps were drawn based on her detailed descriptions, escape routes identified, guard rotations noted. Vera and the other escaped slaves added their own observations, creating a comprehensive picture of their target. Meanwhile, Moonhaven prepared for war. Warriors trained day and night, weapons were forged and enchanted, supplies gathered for the 3-day march to Ravenclaw territory. Thorne led much of the preparation personally, his presence inspiring confidence among his pack. Yet each night he found time to seek Selene out, often joining her on the moon tower balcony where she watched the stars with wonder still fresh after years underground. "Will you tell me about your childhood?" he asked one such evening, the waxing moon casting silver light across his features. "Before Ravenclaw destroyed your pack." Celine hesitated, protective instinct warring with the growing trust between them. "Why do you want to know?" "Because you know much about me through our bond and the stories others tell, yet I know little of you beyond your time in captivity. I would understand the woman, not just the survivor." The request was reasonable, she realized, and perhaps sharing her past might help her reclaim it from the shadow of what followed. "Riverstone was small but peaceful," she began, her voice soft with memory. "We lived along the Silver River, fishing and trading with neighboring packs. My father was a beta, respected for his fairness in settling disputes. My mother tended our medicinal gardens, growing herbs that other packs sought for healing." As she spoke, memories long suppressed resurfaced. Her younger brother's laughter as they swam in the cool river, her grandmother's stories by firelight, tales of ancient wolves and moon magic, the simple joy of belonging, of safety within her pack's embrace. Thorn listened without interruption, his presence steady and attentive. Through their bond, she felt his genuine interest, his anger at what had been stolen from her, his admiration for her resilience in surviving what followed. "Your grandmother," he said when she finally fell silent, "the one who told you about your silver resistance. Was she silver blessed as well?" Celine nodded. "Though she never called it that. She said we had moon in our blood, whatever that meant. Her mother had it too, apparently. She warned me never to reveal it, said it would make me a target." "She was right to warn you," Thorn acknowledged. "Throughout history, the Silver Blessed have been sought by packs seeking advantage in conflicts. Some were treated as honored members, others as tools to be used." "And how does Moonhaven view such gifts?" Celine asked directly. "As blessings from the moon goddess, to be respected and nurtured." His answer came without hesitation. "The Silver Blessed who choose to use their abilities in service to the pack are honored, but the choice must be theirs." "And if I chose to leave once this conflict ends?" Thorn's expression remained steady, though through their bond she sensed a flicker of something like pain. "Then you would leave with our gratitude and protection, free to make your own path." The simple affirmation of her autonomy touched something deep within Celine. 7 years of captivity had taught her to expect coercion, to assume that her usefulness would always be exploited. Thorn's consistent respect for her choices, even when they might contradict his desires, represented a freedom more profound than merely escaping physical chains. The night before their planned departure for Ravenclaw territory, Celine found herself unable to sleep. Her training with Freya had advanced remarkably, but she still doubted her readiness to face a Blood King. The responsibility weighed heavily, compounded by concern for those still enslaved in the mines. She left her quarters, walking the quiet corridors of the moon tower until she reached the highest balcony. The night air carried the scent of pine and distant snow from the mountain peaks, clean and wild compared to the stale dust of the mines. Above, the moon hung nearly full, its light painting the valley in silver and shadow. "Couldn't sleep either?" She turned to find Thorn approaching, his tall figure silhouetted against the moonlight. Even after weeks in his company, his presence still affected her in ways she found difficult to rationalize, a pull that transcended the blood bond connecting them. "Too much to think about," she admitted, as he joined her at the railing. "Second thoughts about tomorrow?" "No, just awareness of what's at stake." Thorn nodded, understanding flowing through their bond. "Elder Gideon believes there's a way to strengthen our advantage before we march. He's been researching ancient texts regarding true mate bonds." Celine tensed slightly. "I thought we had agreed to set that matter aside until after this conflict." "We did," Thorn acknowledged, "and I have honored that agreement. But Gideon raised the point independently, from a tactical perspective." "What tactical perspective could possibly involve mate bonds?" "The blood bond we share will begin fading with tomorrow's full moon," Thorn explained. Its strength has enhanced your training, accelerated your ability to manipulate silver. Without it, you may lose some of that advancement. And the alternative? A true mate bond would be permanent, far stronger than what we currently share. It would potentially increase your abilities significantly, particularly against blood magic. Celine turned fully to face him, searching his expression and the emotions flowing through their connection. Is this a convenient tactical suggestion, or something you want regardless of our current situation? The directness of her question brought a small smile to his lips. Both, he admitted. I've made no secret of my belief that you are my true mate, but I would not use our current crisis to pressure you into a commitment you're not ready to make. The decision must be yours, freely given. Celine leaned against the stone railing, considering his words. The temporary blood bond had indeed accelerated her training tremendously. Each day it seemed to grow stronger rather than weaker, their connection deepening beyond mere shared energy to include flashes of thought, awareness of each other's presence even at distance, intuitive understanding that required no words. She had fought against the implications, fearing another form of captivity, yet in her heart, she recognized the fundamental difference between chains imposed and bonds chosen. Thorn had proven himself repeatedly, respecting her autonomy even when it conflicted with his own desires or tactical advantage. What would this ritual involve? She asked finally. An exchange of blood and vows beneath the full moon, Thorn answered, marking each other as mates. The bond forms naturally after that, permanent and unbreakable. And if we survive this conflict, what then? Then we build whatever future you wish, as Luna of Moonhaven, if that is your choice, or something else entirely if you prefer. The bond creates connection, not obligation. Celine gazed out at the moonlit valley, memories of her grandmother's stories echoing in her mind. The old woman had spoken of destiny, of chains broken and bonds formed, of silver blood and moonlight magic. At the time, Celine had dismissed the tales as comforting fantasies. Now she wondered if they had been prophecy instead. "I'll consider it," she said finally. "But I make no promises." Thorn nodded, accepting her uncertainty without pressure. "That's all I ask." Morning brought organized chaos as Moonhaven's warriors prepared to march. Weapons were distributed, provisions packed, final orders given to those remaining behind to protect the territory. Celine found herself the center of attention as warriors sought to glimpse the Silver Blessed who would supposedly help them defeat a Blood King. The scrutiny made her uncomfortable, but she endured it with outward calm, focusing instead on her preparations. Freya had provided special gauntlets inlaid with silver that responded to Celine's touch, designed to amplify her ability to manipulate the metal. Valkyrie had insisted she train with basic defensive weapons as well, acknowledging that magical ability alone might not be sufficient in close combat. As the army assembled in the main courtyard, a messenger arrived breathless from the border watchtowers. "Ravenclaw forces are on the move," he reported to Thorn. "A large contingent heading north toward our territory." The news altered their plans immediately. Instead of a 3-day march to Ravenclaw territory, they would intercept the approaching forces at the border, a day's journey at most. The changed circumstances created both advantage and complication. They would meet their enemy on more favorable ground, but with less time to prepare than originally planned. "Drayson must know we're planning to disrupt his ritual," Thorn said grimly as they departed through Moonhaven's massive gates. "He's bringing the fight to us instead." "Or creating a distraction," Celine suggested, "engaging our forces while completing the ritual elsewhere." The possibility caused Thorn to alter their strategy yet again. The main army would continue toward the border, while a smaller force including Thorn, Celine, Valkyrie, and select elite guards would circle around to approach the mines from the east, hopefully bypassing the bulk of Ravenclaw's warriors. They traveled swiftly through forest paths known only to Moonhaven wolves, their pace grueling but necessary given the compressed timeline. Celine found herself drawing on the blood bond frequently, Thorn's strength flowing through their connection to supplement her own endurance. As the sun began to set, they reached a ridge overlooking the Ravenclaw compound. Even from this distance, changes were visible. Strange purple light emanated from the mine entrances, pulsing with unnatural rhythm. The air itself felt wrong, heavy with malevolent energy that set wolf instincts on alert. "Blood magic," Elder Gideon murmured, his aged face grim, growing stronger by the hour. They established a temporary camp hidden within the tree line, finalizing their approach for the coming night. The plan was relatively straightforward. Celine would guide them through secondary mine entrances she had learned during her years of captivity, bypassing the main shafts likely to be heavily guarded. Once inside, they would locate and disrupt the ritual while freeing as many slaves as possible. As darkness fell completely and the full moon rose above the trees, Thorn approached Celine where she sat slightly apart from the others, mentally reviewing the mine layouts. "We should make our decision about the mate bond," he said quietly, seating himself beside her. "The moon is at its zenith, the most powerful time for such rituals." Celine looked up at the perfect white circle overhead, feeling its pull in her blood. The decision had weighed on her throughout their journey, possibilities and consequences turning in her mind without resolution. Now, with danger imminent and the bond between them already beginning to fade with the full moon's arrival, she found clarity emerging from uncertainty. "If we do this," she said carefully, "it must be with full understanding. I won't be property, won't be controlled. I need your word that my choices remain my own, bond or no bond." "You have it," Thorn replied without hesitation. "The mate bond joins us, but does not subsume either into the other. Two wolves running side by side, not one controlling the other's path." His sincerity flowed through their connection, absolute and unwavering. In that moment, Celine realized the final truth she had been avoiding. This was not merely tactical advantage or convenient alliance. Something fundamental had formed between them from that first moment in the abandoned mine chamber, something that transcended rational explanation or careful planning. "Yes," she said simply, "I choose this. I choose you." Relief and joy surged through their bond, Thorn's emotions washing over her with unexpected warmth. He extended his hand, palm up, a ceremonial silver dagger resting across it. "The ritual is simple but binding," he explained. "Blood freely given, vows freely spoken, marks freely accepted." Under the full moon's witness, they performed the ancient rite. Blood mingled as they clasped hands, silver dagger between their palms. Words older than written history passed their lips, binding promises of partnership and loyalty transcending mere possession. And finally the marking, Thorn's teeth finding the junction of Celine's neck and shoulder as she did the same to him, completing the physical connection that mirrored their spiritual bond. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Where the blood bond had been a warm current between them, the mate bond erupted like wildfire, searing away the boundaries between their consciousness. Celine gasped as Thorn's thoughts and memories flooded her awareness, his life unfolding alongside her own. She felt his childhood, his training as heir to Moonhaven, his ascension to Alpha King after his father's death, his years of building alliances and strengthening his pack. And he experienced hers in turn, her peaceful early years with Riverstone, the horror of the pack's destruction, the long suffering in the mines, and through it all, her stubborn refusal to surrender her essential self to captivity. When the initial overwhelming connection settled into something manageable, they remained holding each other, foreheads pressed together as they adjusted to this new reality. Through the bond, Celine sensed no triumph or possession in Thorn's mind, only profound gratitude and wonder that she had chosen him despite all reasons for distrust. The silver blessed and the ancient blood joined once more. Elder Gideon's voice broke their private moment. The old wolf stood nearby, his expression one of profound satisfaction. "As the prophecies foretold." "What prophecies?" Celine asked, still dizzy from the bond's formation. "The last Blood King was defeated by such a pairing," the elder explained. "An alpha of the ancient blood and a silver blessed mate, working as one. The texts speak of their combined power creating a counter to corrupt magic, silver purified by moonlight. Before further discussion could occur, a commotion rose from the direction of the mines. Unnatural howls echoed through the night, followed by screams that made Celine's blood run cold. She recognized those sounds from her years of captivity, slaves being punished, or worse. Or, "He's accelerated the ritual," Thorn growled, already moving toward the edge of their camp, using the full moon's power rather than waiting for the eclipse. "But the scrolls said 9 sacrifices over 9 moonless nights," Elder Gideon protested. "Drayson has never respected tradition," Celine said grimly, the mate bond transmitting her certainty to Thorn. If he found a way to compress the ritual, he would take it. Their planned, careful infiltration abandoned, the Moonhaven forces moved swiftly toward the mines. The new mate bond between Celine and Thorn pulsed with shared purpose, her knowledge of the terrain melding seamlessly with his tactical experience. They approached from the eastern tunnels as originally intended, but with greater urgency and less caution than wisdom might dictate. The mines were eerily empty of regular guards, suggesting Drayson had indeed committed most of his forces to the northern confrontation with Moonhaven's main army. But as they penetrated deeper, following the pulsing purple light and the increasingly disturbing sounds of the ritual, they encountered wolves transformed by blood magic, their features distorted, eyes glowing with unnatural light. These corrupted guards fought with berserker fury, feeling no pain, stopping only when completely incapacitated. Valkyrie and the elite guards engaged them while Thorn, Celine, and Elder Gideon pressed forward toward the ritual chamber, guided by Celine's intimate knowledge of the mine layout. They found the central chamber transformed. What had once been a simple excavation now resembled a grotesque cathedral, stalactites and stalagmites shaped into twisted columns supporting a domed ceiling. In the center, a ritual circle had been carved into the stone floor, filled with a substance that appeared to be equal parts silver and blood. Runes, similar to those that had bound Thorn, glowed purple along the circle's perimeter, and in the center stood Drayson, though he barely resembled the Alpha Selene remembered. His form shifted continuously between wolf and human, neither fully one nor the other. His skin had taken on a metallic quality, silver veins visible beneath the surface. His eyes glowed the same purple as the ritual circle, pupilless and inhuman. Around him lay bodies, at least 7 that Celine could count. Slaves sacrificed for his transformation, their life force drained to fuel his ascension. A final victim knelt before him, still alive but barely conscious. With horror, Celine recognized young Kai, one of the slaves who hadn't escaped with the others, his thin frame shaking with terror as Drayson raised a ritual dagger above his heart. "Stop!" Thorn's command rang through the chamber, his alpha power making the very air vibrate. Drayson turned slowly, his distorted features twisting into what might have been a smile. "The Wolf King arrives," he said, his voice overlaid with an unnatural resonance, "just in time to witness my ascension." "This ends now, Drayson," Thorn responded, stepping forward with Celine at his side. "Release the boy and surrender. The Council of Alphas has already condemned your actions." Laughter erupted from the transformed Alpha, echoing unnaturally through the chamber. "Surrender? When I stand on the threshold of godhood? Soon I will transcend the limitations of mere Alpha status. I will become Cruor Rex, the Blood King, master of life and death itself." Through their bond, Celine felt Thorn's assessment of their opponent. Drayson had completed enough of the ritual to gain significant power, but his transformation remained incomplete. He was vulnerable still if they could disrupt the ritual circle's energy. "The silver," Thorn communicated mentally to Celine. "Can you sense it? Control it?" Celine extended her awareness toward the ritual circle, feeling the corrupted silver mixed with blood. It responded sluggishly to her probing, resisting her influence in a way pure silver never had during training. But the mate bond amplified her abilities, Thorn's ancient connection to wolf magic flowing through their link to strengthen her command over the metal. "I need time," she replied through their bond. "Keep him talking." "Why pursue this path, Drayson?" Thorn asked aloud, stepping slightly to one side to draw attention away from Celine's subtle movements. "Your pack was strong, your territory secure. Why risk everything for forbidden power?" "Because it was offered," Drayson snarled, his form rippling with barely contained energy. "The Old Ones spoke to me in dreams, showed me what I could become. No more petty territorial disputes, no more bowing to the Council of Alphas. With the power of the Blood King, I will rule all wolf packs, unite them under my will." As he spoke, Celine worked steadily to influence the silver in the ritual circle, separating it molecule by molecule from the blood that corrupted it. Through their mate bond, Thorn fed her strength and focus, his own considerable power augmenting hers. "The Old Ones lied," Elder Gideon spoke up, his aged voice steady despite the danger. "They always lie. The Blood King doesn't rule. He becomes a vessel, a puppet for powers that were ancient when wolves first walked the earth. You won't rule, Drayson. You will be ruled, your consciousness subsumed while your body serves their purposes." Doubt flickered briefly across Drayson's distorted features before resolve hardened once more. "Lies told by the weak to discourage the strong," he growled. "I've come too far to turn back now. One final sacrifice and my transformation will be complete." He turned back toward Kai, dagger raised once more. But in that moment of distraction, Celine had made sufficient progress with the corrupted silver. With a surge of will channeled through the mate bond, she commanded the silver to separate violently from the blood containing it. The ritual circle exploded in a shower of metallic droplets, the carefully constructed patterns disrupted beyond repair. Drayson howled in fury and pain as the magic backlashed against him, his partially transformed body convulsing as conflicting energies tore through him. "Now!" Thorn shouted, launching himself at the destabilized Alpha. The two collided in a blur of motion, Thorn's natural strength augmented by the ancient blood in his veins. Drayson fought with the desperate fury of one seeing godhood slip from his grasp, his partially transformed state granting him unnatural advantages despite the ritual's disruption. Celine rushed to Kai's side, helping the weakened boy away from the fighting Alphas. "Can you walk?" she asked urgently. "I think so," he whispered, his voice faint but determined. "Elder Gideon," Celine called, "get him to safety. There are other slaves in the holding pens. Free them if you can." As the elder led Kai toward the chamber exit, Celine turned her attention back to the battle raging between Thorn and Drayson. Through their mate bond, she felt Thorn's growing concern. Despite the ritual's disruption, Drayson retained significant power from the sacrifices already completed. His partially transformed state made him dangerously unpredictable, neither fully subject to a wolf's limitations, nor fully corrupted into a blood king. Celine gathered the scattered silver droplets from the destroyed ritual circle, drawing them toward her with her silver blessed ability. The metal responded eagerly now that it was freed from blood corruption, coalescing into a shimmering sphere between her hands. "Thorn," she communicated through their bond. "I need an opening. Direct strike to his heart." Understanding flowed back through their connection. Thorn adjusted his fighting strategy, focusing on creating the opportunity she required rather than attempting to overpower Drayson directly. He drove the corrupted Alpha backward with a series of feints and strikes, maneuvering him toward a position where his guard would necessarily open. The moment came when Drayson overcommitted to an attack, his distorted form lunging forward with unnatural speed. Thorn sidestepped at the last possible instant, using Drayson's momentum against him while exposing his chest. "Now!" Thorn's command rang through their bond. Celine thrust forward with her will and hands together, sending the collected silver streaking toward Drayson like a liquid spear. The metal responded to her command with perfect precision, piercing the corrupted Alpha's chest directly over his heart. Drayson's scream transcended normal sound, vibrating at frequencies that made the chamber's stone walls crack and shudder. The silver spread from the entry point, following blood vessels and nervous pathways throughout his body, seeking and neutralizing the corrupted magic that had transformed him. For a moment, His form stabilized into something recognizably wolf once more, the madness fading from his eyes to be replaced by confusion and pain. "What have I done?" he whispered, the unnatural resonance gone from his voice. Then his body began to dissolve, flesh turning to ash that scattered across the chamber floor. Within seconds, nothing remained but a pile of gray dust where the Alpha had stood, the silver having consumed both corruption and corrupted vessel alike. Silence fell, broken only by the distant sounds of fighting elsewhere in the mines as Valkyrie and the elite guards dealt with the remaining corrupted wolves. Thorn approached Selene slowly, his physical form battered from the fight, but his presence in their bond steady and strong. "It's done," he said simply. "Is it?" Selene questioned, looking around at the chamber that had witnessed so much suffering. "What about the slaves still held captive? What about the Ravenclaw wolves who followed him out of loyalty rather than sharing his madness?" "We free the former and offer the latter a choice," Thorn replied. "Join Moonhaven under our laws, relocate to Allied Pact territories, or form a new pack under leadership they select with council oversight." The pragmatic compassion of his answer confirmed what Selene had already sensed through their bond. Thorn sought justice, not vengeance. Power as responsibility, not entitlement. It was perhaps the final confirmation she needed that her choice to bond with him had been the right one. The days that followed blurred together in a whirlwind of activity. The slaves held in the Ravenclaw mines were freed, many choosing to accompany Thorn and Selene back to Moonhaven. The Ravenclaw pack members who had not participated in blood magic were indeed offered choices rather than punishment, with most electing to form a new pack under Beta leadership, with a probationary period of council oversight. The mines themselves were cleansed through ritual and physical labor alike. The corrupted areas sealed permanently, while the rest were restructured for safer operation under fair conditions. No wolf would ever be enslaved there again. When they finally returned to Moonhaven, a month had passed since their departure. The homecoming celebration lasted 3 days, with feasting, music, and formal recognition of all who had contributed to their victory. Selene found herself honored not as the king's mate, though she was certainly that, but as the Silver Blessed, whose abilities had been crucial to defeating the Blood King. On the final night of celebration, standing on the Moon Tower balcony beneath the stars, Thorn formally asked Selene to accept the title and responsibilities of Luna, the female alpha who would rule Moonhaven beside him. The request came not as assumption based on their mate bond, but as a choice he respected as ultimately hers. "The pack would benefit from your wisdom," he said, his ice-blue eyes reflecting moonlight. "But more importantly, I believe you would find purpose in the role. Your experiences, both the joy of Riverstone and the suffering of captivity, give you perspective few possess. You see value in what others overlook, strength in what seems broken." Through their bond, Selene sensed his absolute sincerity, his willingness to accept whatever decision she made. It was perhaps that very freedom which finalized her choice. "I accept," she said simply. "Not because the bond demands it, but because I choose it freely." B. The formal ceremony took place beneath the next full moon, witnessed by the entire pack. Selene, once a slave with nothing but the clothes on her back, became Luna of Moonhaven, equal in authority to the Alpha King himself. The former slaves from Ravenclaw found places within the pack structure based on their abilities and preferences, rather than assigned status. Young Kai, showing unexpected talent for healing, became Freya's newest apprentice. Vera, with her extensive knowledge of old stories and traditions, joined Elder Gideon in maintaining the pack's historical records. The silver mines that had been Selene's prison for 7 years were transformed under Moonhaven's influence, becoming a center for training young Silver Blessed discovered in other packs. Under Selene's direction, new techniques were developed for using silver in healing rather than harm, for protection rather than imprisonment. The mate bond between Selene and Thorn deepened with time, their connection growing richer and more complex as they learned each other fully. They ruled together as the ancient texts had described, silver and moonlight combined, bringing balance to power that might otherwise corrupt. On quiet nights, they still visited the moon tower balcony, watching stars that Celine never tired of seeing after her years underground. Sometimes they spoke of serious matters, pack business and political alliances. Other times they simply existed in companionable silence, their bond transmitting all that words could not adequately express. My grandmother used to say that chains broken become bonds chosen, Celine remarked on one such night, her hand finding thorns as they gazed at the constellations above. I never understood what she meant until now. Thorn's fingers intertwined with hers, the simple contact reinforcing their deeper connection. The old stories often hold more truth than we recognize. Perhaps she knew what awaited you. Perhaps. Celine smiled, remembering the old woman's mysterious hints about destiny and silver blood and moonlight magic. Or perhaps she simply understood that true freedom isn't the absence of connection, but the ability to choose which connections we form. Through their bond flowed agreement, affection, and the quiet certainty that whatever challenges arose in future years, they would face them together, not as master and possession, but as equals who had chosen each other freely, breaking silver chains to forge a bond far stronger than metal could ever be.